I'm very happy to say I'm here with Michael Gibbs, wonderful guy, wonderful composer, legendary, and very amusing. And here we are. Michael Gibbs, the thing that I want to talk to you about is a little statement that Pat Metheny said to me, and I think it's interesting in the way that it applies to you. He told me that people are always asking him, how do you develop a unique voice? How do you develop your own thing? And of course, Pat tries to tell them, and so he has many things that he says to them. He says things such as, "You follow what you love, follow your musical loves." But what I'm interested in is there is a certain breed of artist, which I think you are a great example of, who didn't have to follow any particular technique to find your own voice. You really found your own voice. So you found a new way of making music. You found a new way of making something that everybody said, what on earth was that? So what I want to know is, when did that first moment come when you were, obviously you'd been involved in music, but when was the first moment when you wrote something you thought, hey, that's really quite interesting. That's something, yeah, I tried that and it kind of worked. When was that moment?
Well, I'm not sure it worked like that. Well, first of all, I think it's extremely difficult not to be unique. One's unique by default, and so I didn't have to try. I just did what Pat said. I just followed my instinct, my heart, and what came out wasn't like anybody else. I still copy other people, but even when I copy, I probably don't do it well enough. I mean, I once I copied an idea, a flavor of Gil Evans, and when I recorded it, I had a lot of Gil's band in the band, and they said, "Oh, Gil," and I was really touched by that. I like that they recognized Gil, but mostly if I copy somebody else, I don't do it well enough that anyone recognizes it.
Right.
So, but I never worried about trying to be unique or find my own voice. I had my own voice whether I wanted it or not.
It's interesting you say that thing about copying. I mean, we all are influenced by people and we all copy other people, but I always find when I copy other people, like for instance, if I'm copying Ellington, somebody hears it and says, "Oh, that sounds like Cab Calloway." Or, you know, if I'm copying the Rolling Stones, they hear it and they say, "Oh, that sounds like Gil Evans."
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Isn't it great? Because
but that's them putting their take
exactly.
on it. So
So
I never worried about it.
Yeah, so it's not a problem to copy because nobody will notice it anyway. And if they do, so what?
I mean, on film scores sometimes producers have already put their music on, and they want music just like that.
Yes.
And I mean, I have been embarrassed sometimes when I can hear where I nicked it from for their sake.
Yes.
And no one else notices this.
No.
But I'm uncomfortable with it.
And how do you like the thing when you write something for a director and they say, "We want it to sound exactly like Mozart." And you write it to sound like Mozart and they say, "Ugh, that doesn't sound like Mozart at all. That sounds like Mick Jagger." You know, and you say, "Well, no, actually it sounds like," you know, and you've copied it. So then you try to get it closer to the thing that they want. And the closer you get to it, the more they want it even closer, until the point where you're actually copying it out note for note.
No, it's dangerous.
Yeah, it's very dangerous.
I don't like being in that area. But the thing is, if you want the job, you got to do it.
You know, I was once asked to do, although this is about you and not about me, I'm doing the talk anyway. I was once asked to do a jingle where I had to do a record copy of another recording, but they couldn't use the other recording.
Yeah.
So they said, "We can't use it, but we want you to make a record that sounds exactly like this other recording." So I tried and I got, you know, I thought it sounded, and the person who was in charge said, no, it doesn't. It's still not right. What's wrong with you? I thought you were competent. I thought you could. So finally, I took the other record, and I actually gave them the other record, and they said, "Well, it's still not right, but I guess it's usable."
Oh, right. That's who you're dealing with.
That's who you're dealing with. Yeah. But I want to talk about some of the sounds that you found, because there are certain sounds where, you know, I think most musicians who love your music, which is a legion of billions of people around the world. But most people who know your music would hear something and say, "Oh, that's a very Mike Gibbs sound." Now, why do you think they say that, and what kinds of things that you've written would you say they say it to?
I can't answer that. I don't know. Well,
Isn't it great to have such a great guy interviewing you who asks questions like this?
I
Better admit it's fun.
I have no idea. I mean, I'm kind of not very. I don't notice bad intonation often, and I think sometimes the bad intonation sort of sounds like my bad.
Well, I'm not sure that it's a bad intonation.
The thing is, I've always got good musicians, so that it's unlikely that they're out of tune. Mind you, I did have a bad intonation situation once that I've gotten some slack for, and I can't. When I listen to it back, I can't tell what it is. There is out of tuneness, but I can't tell why. It was on Joni Mitchell's project.
Oh, really? Paprika Plains.
And when she made the Mingus album.
Oh, right.
Apparently, I've read bits on the internet. When she started working with Mingus, she played him there. Mm-hmm. And his only comment was, "Wow, those strings are out of tune."
Oh, right.
And when I go back, I don't think they're out of tune for the whole thing. It's a 9-minute section of music.
It's big.
And there's one moment where it's out of tune, but that's all a lot of people hear. But anyway, the thing is that this endeared Joni to Mingus, and
right.
They then got working more. So it turned out to be a plus, but it was a negative. Mm. And the thing is, Jaco, who got me the gig in the first place,
right.
His first comment was, "Wow, those strings are out of tune."
Oh.
The thing is, I must have noticed it at some time, but not early enough.
Right.
So whether that's my sound or not, I don't know.
No, I don't think it's that. Let me suggest another thing where I think people would say, "Oh, that's a very Mike Gibbs kind of sound." We were talking last night about your big fat triad voiced and one instrument is playing flat 9. You've got this great, huge, big fat G triad, and then there's one little guy in there playing an A flat. That's very much your kind of sound.
Well, the thing is, it's not just in fact, the instance I remember is a big C triad with a G sharp in it.
Okay.
The thing is that the C triad is huge. It's like the ocean.
Yes.
And the G sharp is a mere grain of salt.
Yes, exactly.
And it's not like C, E, G, G sharp. It's
No.
C, E, G, and there's ambient noise including a G sharp. So it's the ratio of the timbre, the volume, etc. of these other notes.
Yes,
now I love to work that. I mean, I mentioned yesterday how for the last 10 years, which seems like a minute to me, I'm learning what notes to leave out. And I loved all my voicing way of discovering it, because it's a wonderful world to live in. But after a while, I started to leave out notes. What happened was I would write an arrangement, go to a different band, and there would be instruments missing, and it sounded better because some notes were... So I started working on leaving notes out.
It's cheaper, too.
Well, then recently with this Monk project I did, I mean, Monk plays this big, an E flat and a D, a flat 9 down, and that's all. And with a voicing, in the chord symbol. A chord, and I'm going through the chord, trying all these notes, and none of them sound like Monk. And then eventually I just had the trombones play E flat and the D, and it fitted. It was
Why
right.
not?
So, but I couldn't adapt it to myself overnight. I had to. Each time I'm in a situation, it took me a long time to let go of these notes that I had found. But I'm eventually doing it quicker now. I can leave out notes, and it's... what happens is the rhythm section's playing the note you leave out, or the guitarist or the pianist.
Right.
So, again, it's there, but it's less of it.
It's percentage.
It seems to work.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, I feel like... I'm getting on now, but I'm still discovering these things the same way I did when I was a student.
Right.
And so it's very...
Well, I remember when I was a student in your class, the very first day you came to class, we sometimes reminisce about about that. When you walked in, you just sort of sat there and you said, well, what would you like to talk about? Because we thought you'd have all this stuff prepared for us. And it was the first day, it's obviously your first day, and you didn't have anything prepared, and our hearts sank. We thought, oh no, this guy had that. So, but no, it's okay, because then you said, what would you like to talk about? And we sort of thought, oh, we're sunk. Well, okay, let's give it a try. And we talked about, I just asked a question, I believe it was me who asked a question about one of your pieces, and I said, well, what on earth were you thinking, Mike, about when you were writing that piece? And then we thought, okay, now we got something, because you said, oh, yes, I can talk about that. So you went over to the piano, and you said, well, you know, one day I was sitting at the piano, and I played this voicing, and you played one of your beautiful Mike Gibbsian voicings. And you said, I just thought it sounded so nice. And then you just sat there. And we waited, and we waited, and we waited, and we thought, we're sunk. And then you finally got it. I said, Mike, well, what was the next thing you thought? And the next thing you said, you got up and you said, yes, well, then I decided I'd look at that. And you wrote it up on the blackboard. And you said, I noticed this interval and this interval was kind of what was making it sound nice. So then I wrote this, and then I wrote that. And you showed how the compositional element of the whole piece was based on your enjoyment, your sort of oral enjoyment of that particular interval and that voicing. And then the method came in of the madness. And so you always have a method, but it stems from that oral pleasure of that initial voicing.
Oh, Richard, I'm glad you said that.
Yes. No,
because, you know, I've been asked a couple of times about writing a book about my methods, but when I talk to a class and I start to talk about this area that's just before music, before you start talking C sharps, which has to do with my physical, emotional response to a sound. And I see glazed eyes coming, and they don't want to get into that territory. And so then I meet another class, and I'll ask them, well, what do you want to talk about? And they say this, and I know my answer already has to do with this area, and I'm trying to figure out how can I say it in such a way that it's interesting. And I haven't found, what I've been doing is making it shorter than my spiel. So that before they get glazed and fall asleep, I can quickly jump back to saying what they want, which is techniques and things.
Yeah.
But I haven't quite found how to talk.
Yeah.
How to talk about it in a way that's interesting to this.
Yeah,
so I've never written the book.
Sure.
But the thing is,
I will.
But what you've just said, you heard it.
Yes.
And you've taken it in. So if you can, then it means it's.
I'm sure a few people have
but I want to do it in such a way that it's interesting to them. So I know I've got to tie a technique into it. Like say, I've got to say it in musical terms and not in. They don't want to. They probably want to hide from themselves.
If they have ears, I'm sure it's interesting to them.
Well, I hope so.
If they're lazy and deaf, then you've got no choice.
Yes.
Yeah. But let me talk a little bit also about what. Let me ask you this. Here's a good question. What was the most fun musical project you've ever done in your life? And you've done a lot of fun musical projects, my dear fellow. So,
well, I know there were a lot, but the first one that comes to mind is John McLaughlin's Apocalypse album. Actually, I wasn't at much of the recording. I was there for one day at the beginning. Then I went on the road and came back for just the mix. And I working on it though. Me at home at the piano and getting into the music, which is incredibly thrilling, full music. It was a huge thrill. I mean, not only because it was also for symphony orchestra with a large jazzy band. I mean, the second Mahavishnu band.
Sorry about that.
But it was fun. And working with John was fun. A lot of the fun had to do with discovering this music, which is a whole new thing to me. It's still rich to me. It still feeds me with ideas. John's, having 7 bars, 8 bars, and 9 bars, and then the drummer has 3 lots of 8 bars.
Yes.
I mean, so it might not be so grand, but it was very new to me. It broke a lot of rules, which is what I love to do.
Right.
Anyway, so that was a big thrill. And of course, it generated a lot of interest. I got a lot of calls after that.
Oh, good. We like that.
So, John, thanks a lot.
Yeah,
Let's
right.
do another one.
As far as your compositional, your different compositions, obviously, all of our children are dear to us, but of all of your compositions, which was the most fun for you to write? Maybe it came out quickly, maybe it came out and you giggled. I mean, what was the one that you remember as being really fun to write?
Well, there's two answers for that. Sweet Rain, I think I wrote in about 30 seconds. It literally it was like a boil, and it burst in 30 seconds. I mean, it fell out of my pencil in 30 seconds. But I enjoyed Family Joy because it came out... The idea, I got one little idea which suddenly developed into the whole piece. You know, I moved from this chord, I don't know what to, I don't think in chord symbol terms, but
good.
C, F, B flat and C.
Thank you.
And for some reason played the same chord on A. And suddenly the piece, you know, I started moving the same movement with some half-step movements as well.
Right.
It's only those two elements. This chord down a third and then down it, sometimes moving another down another third and sometimes moving a half step. And the whole piece came out. And then in a sort of release, it went into something that feels very joyous to me. It's just two sharp 9 chords. Anyway, the elements seem very simple, but the way it seemed to happen to me rather than me make it happen. And that piece has lasted. It's been interesting to me ever since. I still find it interesting. And also, I thought, from not being an improviser, at least, I mean, I still hope that I could play a B flat blues, but I can't do much else. So, so I thought these chords were not practical to an improviser.
Right.
And then Kenny Wheeler was on the first date and just whipped through them like it was nothing.
As he does.
As he does. And his improvising was always interesting to me because I could feel that I could hear him exploring the harmonica.
Yes.
And the fact that I liked what I had done and then to hear somebody really make music out of it, it's one of the most fun pieces for me. And then Ian Carkle said something about my music and mentioned that piece as being one of the most joyous pieces he's ever heard. And I really liked that reaction. So that piece has fed me a lot.
Great. See, there you go.
I need to lie down.
Okay, you can lie down. Let me ask you one more question. One more question is, what are you working on now, and what's your next project, apart from being paid £100 million?
No, I'm not.
No.
I've been working non-stop until the gig I had the other day, and I actually have a lot of blank space. But I am going to do some Upper Austria Jazz Orchestra. I'm doing a program we already did earlier this year, swing and all that jazz. And then I'm writing an arrangement for Tommy Smith's orchestras.
Oh, good.
Essen, Scottish National Jazz Orchestra. And it's this concert he's doing is with Harold Anderson, and I'm arranging a piece of Harold's for Harold and the Scottish. Okay. So, and I've listened to the piece, and it takes me into delicious territory. Not that I'm comfortable with it, but that I can explore it. And I have a nice chunk of time from now to September, so I can. I mean, it's just perfect.
So now you can start practicing trombone.
I can, but I've got to learn Spanish first.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I've been living in Spain 5 years, and I went to buy bread the other day, and all I needed to say was, she taught me, dos barras, two loaves.
Okay.
And she was almost cross. You've been here 3 years. This was 2 years ago. You've been here 3 years, and you can't. How dare you? And she's right.
But do you know the Spanish word for trombone?
No.
Oh, well, okay, that's a tragedy. I think you should at least know that.
No, but I should. I actually got my trombone out the other day because I was afraid that the slide would have rusted altogether. And I couldn't believe how slick it was. After 5 years hidden in my closet there. I've got it. And so I did actually attempt to toot, and actually a note came out, awful note, but it came out.
Yes.
So I have hope, and I'm looking for an amateur band in which to play third trombone.
Well, I think I can.
After I've done that, I'll audition for
Bandzilla. Yeah, that's right, because you're going to be third trombone in Bandzilla when it starts.
It would be good to have a first, second, a third, and a third, and a substitute
You'll be substitute third. That's okay.
That's do you know it's the funnest place to be, because you have somebody great on lead like Mark Nightingale, and you have a new hot kid on trombone,
jazz chair. Yes.
No, who you mentioned this name?
Elliot Mason.
Oh yes, I'd love to meet him.
A guy
and then you have a really good bass trombone player, and then my notes to sound wonderful in this company.
No matter what you play.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's the best place to be.
Yeah, good. Well, you've got the gig.
Thank you.
And I'm sure your trombone loves you, and so do we. So thank you very much, Michael Gibbs. Thank you. The applause, right? Very good. And goodbye, and
thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Much, Richard.
Hey, lover. Thinking of getting up close and intimate with your loved one tonight for a bit of romantic fooling around? Forget it, because I'm Richard Niles, and instead of playing Lady Penelope and the Butler, you could be under the covers listening to my podcast, Radio Richard. Intriguing interviews and procreating performances from master musicians like Bob James, Lawrence Juber, Michael Brecker, or Leo Sayer. Hey, if you're not shagged out after that, there's always time for a little bit of fun and games afterwards. Don't miss a moment of the fun. Subscribe to Radio Richard.